Not all empires have made their mark on history, but Russia's empire began making its mark many centuries ago and continues to make itself heard to this moment in time. Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24, 2022. The Russian Empire spanned a vast territory, which, at its height, stretched from Poland to the Pacific. This empire was home to hundreds of cultures and millions of people throughout the entire Eurasian continent. The official start date of this empire is debatable. While some cite its origins as being as far back as 1450, others insist that the Russian Empire did not truly begin until 1721, under the auspices of that oft-praised champion of Russian history, Peter the Great. Regardless of the exact start date, to understand how Russian imperial might came to be, one must go back even further to the very founding of Russia itself. Russia originates from the Rus people, who settled in the region that roughly corresponds to modern-day Russia in 862 CE. About 100 years later, the region strengthened its ties with the Byzantine Empire, the Christian bulwark of Eastern Europe, and made Christianity its official religion in 988 CE. This manifestation of early Russian power was largely disrupted in the 13th century due to the rise of the Mongol horde in the east. First, Genghis Khan and then his successors rampaged through much of Asia, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe. The early Russian state did not effectively recover until the late 1400s. This was the time when Russia came into its own, and from here on out, the Russian state would arise from the ashes of the Mongol Khanate to become the greatest juggernaut of the Eurasian sphere. It is not a coincidence that the collapse of the Byzantine Empire, Russia's Orthodox Christian mentors, triggered the rise of the Russian Empire. The Byzantine capital, Constantinople, was known as the Second Rome. The Ottoman Turks defeated the Byzantine Empire in 1453. With this defeat, the Second Rome of Christendom was lost, and Constantinople ultimately became Istanbul, Turkey. Ivan III was the first Russian monarch to take up the mantle of turning Moscow into the Third Rome. He called himself a Tsar and married a Byzantine princess. He would reign quite successfully until the year 1505. After Ivan III's rule ended, his son, Vasily III, took his place at the helm and used his army to expand Russian imperial might in all directions. Acquiring new lands was not easy, and it required the establishment of advanced defensive fortifications, which meant the expenditure of more money and manpower to maintain them. After a brief scare from the so-called Golden Horde, the Russians rallied again under the tutelage of Vasily's son, Ivan IV, also known as Ivan the Terrible. Ivan, born in 1530, sent his forces towards Kazan, aiming for the remnants of the Mongols. Ivan also put the Livonian Order, a collection of Livonian knights and Teutonic knights, on the defensive. These knights were ordered to stamp out paganism from Eastern Europe, and although Russia had become Christian, there were still a lot of pagan centers in the Baltic region. However, the struggle against the Livonian Order dragged on as Denmark, Sweden, and Poland were pulled into the conflict. The Livonian War, along with the loss of his wife, left a sour taste in Ivan's mouth. As pressure from the West kept mounting, Ivan sent an envoy to the Vatican in 1581 and negotiated peaceful terms. He would die soon afterward in 1584. After Ivan IV died in 1584, he was succeeded by his son Feodor I. Feodor I was young, inexperienced, and a puppet ruler. During his rule, Boris Godunov, the chief of the secret police and Fyodor's brother-in-law, ran the show from behind the scenes. Russia began to decline at this point, and the economy began to falter. Godunov, who acted as regent, tried his best to issue reforms that brought stability to the empire. In the meantime, though generally liked by the people, Fyodor shrunk further into the shadows, allowing Boris to rule in his stead. Fyodor ultimately died in 1598 without an heir, once again leaving the question of succession open. At this point, Boris decided to seize power for himself, setting the stage for the time of troubles. For the first time, a man outside the dynastic line was crowned Tsar on September 1, 1598. The time of troubles was just that. Rebellions and famines became a common theme in the coming years. After an armed mob took over Moscow in 1612, Mikhail Romanov was elected the new Tsar. Notably, the Romanov dynasty would continue in force for over 300 years, from 1613 to 1917. Mikhail pursued reforms until he died in 1645. He was succeeded by his son Alexei Mikhailovich. During this time, Russia's borders kept expanding in the north and east through new acquisitions made in Siberia, even leading to a clash with the Chinese Qing dynasty over territorial concerns. After Alexei's death, his son, Fyodor III, ascended to the throne. After his death, the succession came into dispute. From this drama would emerge Peter, the one they would end up calling Great. Peter was the sole ruler of the realm by the time he was 24 years old. Peter, who had been brought up in the suburbs of Moscow, where there was a heavy presence of Western Europeans, concluded that Russia needed to be a place where the East met the West. He felt that Western learning could provide Russia with the shot to the arm it needed to remain a viable power. Tsar Peter would become known for establishing academies just as much as he was known for establishing armament factories. After spoiling a coup at home, Peter began paying attention to the dangers abroad. Sweden was then in control of the Baltic Sea, and it had seized territory during the Russian time of troubles and denied Russia access ever since. For Russia to use this body of water, they would have to go through Sweden to get it. After a back and forth that continued for years, Peter delivered a decisive defeat to Sweden, and by doing so, made Russia a major power in the Baltic region. After finding out that the Swedish monarch had sought refuge in the Ottoman Empire, he marched against the Ottomans. As hostilities flared up, the Russo-Ottoman War broke out in 1710. This war was a humiliating campaign for Peter, who ended up losing public face. He retreated from the defeat by striking a blow, yet again, to Sweden. Peter the Great had not named a successor when he died on February 8, 1725. Catherine I, Peter the Great's wife, would serve on the throne until her death in 1727, when Peter II, her grandson, came into power. But since he was only 12 years old at the time, he would be stewarded by a regency council. However, he died less than 3 years later, and the Supreme Privy Council took it upon themselves to select Peter the Great's niece, Anna of Courland, to serve as empress. Among the terms of the agreement was that Anna would not be able to declare war without the council's dissent, get married, or name an heir to the throne. This was a major change in the Russian government, which had been run as an absolute monarchy until that point. In some ways, limiting the power of the Russian monarch seemed to be a move toward a constitutional monarchy, such as England. But in this case, it was more a transition toward an oligarchy, the rule of an elite few who pulled the strings of the empress. At any rate, the Supreme Privy Council's ability to curtail the power of the imperial monarch would prove to be entirely short-lived. Upon coming to power, Anna proved herself to be quite an able stateswoman, and she managed to maneuver factions, those who were discontent with the nobles, to her side. Soon enough, the odds were stacked against the nobles, and they were forced to take back their conditions, which allowed the imperial throne to once again be the sole ruling force of Russia. Anna reigned for 10 more years, finally passing away in 1740. The imperial crown was then given to her great-nephew, Ivan VI, who ruled for a very short time. Russian insiders were then able to put Elizabeth, the daughter of Peter the Great, on the throne. Elizabeth would be one of the longer-lived monarchs of Peter the Great's immediate successors, as she went on to reign for close to 20 years. The most notable event of Elizabeth's reign was the 7 Years' War, which was being waged in Europe against Prussia. Prussia was primarily made up of territories in modern-day Germany, but it also contained sections of modern-day Belgium, Denmark, and even Russia. In 1762, the passing of Empress Elizabeth turned a potential military victory into a political defeat. The Tsar who took Elizabeth's place, Peter III, sympathized with the Prussians. Just as Russia was on the verge of absolute victory, he negotiated a peace treaty. This led to the Officers' Revolt that resulted in Peter III's overthrow, marking the beginning of a new era. Catherine the Great had a part to play in her husband's overthrow. The fact that Catherine, a Prussian woman of German origin, could get the people to side with her to overthrow a Russian-born monarch is quite incredible. This serves as a testament to how unpopular Peter III and his policies were. In this backdrop of dissatisfaction with the previous regime, Catherine was coronated as Empress on September 22, 1762. She was wary of the people who brought her to power, so she abolished state services, granting them control of state functions in provinces. Catherine's expansionist policy which even included going toe-to-toe with the Ottoman Empire, saw Russia expand into a vast empire. After Catherine's death, her son, Paul I, the new ruler, successfully joined the growing alliance against France, colluding with older foes like the Ottomans. However, Paul concluded the whole mess by signing a separate peace agreement with the French. Paul's public dislike ended in his abdication and murder by insiders, after which his son, Alexander, came into power. This new ruler set about concentrating on domestic reforms. Still, the Napoleonic threat would arise time and again to shift his focus from local to foreign matters. European matters became increasingly convoluted, and by 1828, the Russo-Turkish War was underway. Alexander had passed away before the war, and his successor, Nicholas I, oversaw the next stage of the Russian Empire. Nicholas found plenty of trouble in the intrigue of his court, but his success in the Russo-Turkish War helped him find footing. Serbia, Moldova, and Wallachia were now free, but Russia's relationship with these states would become increasingly complex over the next few years. Over religious concerns of the Orthodox faithful, Russia and the Ottoman Empire went to war. The major Western European forces sided with the Ottomans, and Nicholas I perished amidst all this chaos. A deal, not too favorable for the Russians, was struck to end the conflict. Nicholas's son, Alexander II, rose to power. In the aftermath of the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, which ended with a French defeat, Russia began to build up its navy once again in the waters of the Black Sea. This maneuver would help facilitate Russia's latest round of fighting with the Ottoman Empire when the Russo-Turkish War of 1877 erupted. The war was preceded by unrest in the Balkans, particularly in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and then followed by a wave of brutal crackdowns by the Turks. It was a bold move on the part of these small Balkan nations to take on the Ottoman Empire, even if it was in decline. The conflicts that stemmed from the Balkans continued for a long time and ended up causing the Balkan Wars in the early 1910s, which eventually led to the First World War. The reign of Alexander II was followed by Alexander III and Nicholas II. During their reigns, Russia was involved in the complex political situation in the Balkans. On the other hand, the Habsburg-led Austro-Hungary Empire, Western Europe, and the Ottoman empires had their own motives. The Russian monarchy finally came to an end in November of 1917 with the revolution of the leftist Bolsheviks. Russia rose from relative obscurity to become one of the greatest empires the world has ever known. The landmass of this empire spanned from both Europe and Asia, from the west to the east, from the Arctic to the Middle East, and from the north to the south. The Russian Empire had always been an amalgamation of far-flung regions and cultures, and the greatest challenge for Russian rulers was holding all of these different pieces of the Russian puzzle together. Some Russian leaders attempted an aggressive Russification approach to make the residents of the vast empire more Russian, by forcing the Russian language, religion, and customs upon those who grew up with vastly different traditions. After the fall of the Russian Empire, the communists tried a more all-embracing approach, attempting to accept regional differences as long as the main tenets of communist ideology were embraced. To learn more about the Russian Empire, check out our book, The Russian Empire, a captivating guide to the third largest empire in history, starting from Peter the Great to the Russian Revolution. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free mythology bundle ebook while they're still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.